Whether it's people sitting in HR or people out in their schools or people on buses, that's what drives our organization. I've really had an interesting year. We all have, all of us, and really have spent a lot of time reflecting and thinking about why did I get started in this work, this K-12 work that has been a passion for my entire career. And for me, it always comes back to what my core values are around a growth mindset. And so I just want to hit on some of the things that I've heard from my great colleagues in their presentations. I love Carol Dweck's work on mindset because once I read it, I recognized it's really how you approach the work, right? And recognizing what do you believe about people, and that people are always a work in progress and they're constantly growing, and the belief that they can, that they're not fixed, that people have the ability to grow and develop. And when you give them the opportunity to develop and grow their skills and their talents in areas that they're passionate about, you take off the ceiling. You just give them the opportunity to go as far and as wide. Some of my favorite opportunities when I think about work, whether it was in the classroom or whether it's my job now, is when I have those conversations with employees and they begin to go, you know what, I've been thinking about, I couldn't go to sleep last night because I was thinking we could do this and this and this and this, and that creativity and that innovation. And then as a leader, all of us have an opportunity to say, okay, so what structures and resources do you need to be successful in that? So let you set it free. I have my master's in gifted education. It was a part that I love the most about working with gifted education students, and with all students, because it's best practices for all students, is to take the ceiling off and go, how far can you go, and continue to push and prod and say, that's good, what else can we do? And I want to just take a moment and say, that's what my colleagues do for me every day. The best part of this work is our interconnectedness and how we're approaching this work. So there is no more, that's HR work. They all have a piece of HR work. I was going to have them say, every time I talk about something, to say me too, every time they saw a connection. Because there's tons of opportunity. I'll give you an example. Jewel and I serve on the bargaining team together. That's never been done before. We had two chiefs on the bargaining team. Because traditionally, HR goes to labor, that's us. We'll find out from finance what we need to know to answer our questions, but that's our process. No, it is a district-wide process. And everyone who needs to be part of that process needs to be at the table. She sharpens my thinking. I hope I sharpen her too. And so there's those pieces. And sometimes we go, okay, stop, time out. You know, we've got to kind of just work through it. But that's what that partnership and that collaboration looks like. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about KSD 2.0 as a whole, because as we thought about each piece of what we've talked about, my constant thought is, how is this impacting our workforce? How are they adjusting to this, right? And so we spent some time at KSD Leadership talking about managing transitions. William Bridges' work on managing transitions has been out forever. Lots of people have read it, several iterations of it. But one of the most powerful quotes, I think, that impacts our workforce, it isn't changes that do you in, it's the transitions. So we can put up a new KSD 2.0 chart. We can call it KSD 2.0. We can say this is going to be your new director of assessment. We can say Janelle's going to be your new chief learning officer. Those are changes to roles and responsibilities. We've talked a little bit about some of those changes. But change without focus on transition sounds like this. Just because everything has changed, don't think that anything around here is different. People will go back to who I've always called because I know they're friendly. And we've got to change that practice, right? And say, how about it shouldn't matter who you call, because you're going to get an expected level of service. And that's the transition. So transition is different from change because transition is psychological. Change is situational. And we can look at our organization and our workforce, and we've talked about this as an HR leadership team, and we know we have people in all three of these different phases. We have the letting go of the old way and the old identity. They're dealing with loss. They're going through the grief cycle. So we're working with our HR leaders to say, where are people? When you're talking with them, can we diagnose where they are? Because sometimes they're in that anger. Sometimes they're in blame. Sometimes they're in acceptance. We'll get to that. And the next thing is going through the in-between time when the old is gone but the new isn't fully operational. So this can feel like, well, they've got the organizational chart, and a lot of the questions I heard you all ask today are kind of in this in-between, but how how does that work? Because we used to have technology integration, but those people aren't here anymore, so how is that going to work? It's a very transitional type of question, that in between. And then coming out of transition and making a new beginning. That's that vision, that new identity. And as we move into this new identity of KSD 2.0, it doesn't mean that what was there before was bad. It means that we're moving forward in a direction that fully utilizes all of our talents and our skills in a way that people can be passionate about and is interconnected. So I just wanted to make sure I put that framework there because everything that everyone shared shows different pieces of that transitional phase, those phases. So let's talk a little bit about HR. I didn't put down every single person in HR because I thought I would focus more on the functions. We actually have 4 teams in HR under KSD 2.0. We have legal and labor. That's being led by our executive director, Tim Reynolds. And in that role, we are taking the lead on all bargaining for certificated and classified and then making sure that our employment processes for non-represented employees are also covered. ADA, legal support, and risk management. And when you look at those things, you can say, well, legal support only in employee matters? Absolutely not. This is where KSD 2.0 and that interconnectedness really comes into play. Tim is a resource for every community. Keith Kluge for risk management is a resource for every community. Now, they may be housed in HR, but they're working interconnected. HR building support, Matt is our director there, and providing support for substitute services, employment services, and investigations, so that corrective action work that happens at the school, and then much of it that happens at the district should it be more major in nature. Then we have our HR operations. You just saw that. You had an opportunity to see what was going on right there. So we have our generalists. Those are the people that you saw in the room that you went through, working from recruitment all the way to separation. Is it important for people to have one person to connect with? Absolutely. So each school has a dedicated HR generalist, one of those individuals in the room, that carries them through all the way, recruitment through separation. So I'm a principal and I've got 3 openings, and Bree is my person. I'm calling Bree. She's saying, I've got great candidates. And she's working through that process. And the wonderful thing is the 6 generalists sit in that bullpen, and they're saying, do you have somebody for math? Do you have somebody for science? I've got somebody over here that needs this. And they're working and collaborating in that team space. And then we have our professional development team. Everyone from the classified employee, the teacher, and the leader deserves high-quality PE. And so, yet another place where we're interacting with all of our communities. So one of the things I wanted to share with our leaders, and I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to see, is so how will HR service be different because of KSD 2.0? This is kind of the so what slide, right? I saw that word chart, but what does that mean for me? Well, it means dedicated legal and labor support at the certificated and classified levels. And they're skilled and experienced practitioners. As we had openings going into KSD 2.0, we looked for the highest quality candidates for each one of those. So to have Tim as an experienced attorney with a high reputable law firm who has bargained 14 to 15 contracts just this year was key for us as he takes that work on. It's so interesting. I think one of the chiefs, Melissa actually said to me, she's like, he's been here forever. It's just how quickly, he didn't have to, somebody said, do you know what self-ID is? He goes, yes. And he could recite all the different parts of it. That is key when you bring somebody on staff, to be able to have that level of knowledge. Joellen is there as well, who's bargained over 25 years here in the district, so she knows those contracts well. Point of contact for all non-labor HR director support. HR generalists, the ones I just shared with you there. And one of the key things here is that they will know your building and your building needs. One of the things that we heard, and we're going to continue to talk about our two-way communication with our school buildings and our district offices, one of the things we heard is we're allocating and we're looking at the numbers, but you don't know what that means for my schools. We took that feedback and we said, what can we do to change that? So our HR generalists are going to be visiting our schools this fall and actually walking through the programs, the specific programs. So for instance, Springbrook has an essay program and an IB program at their school. That generalist should go to the essay classroom They should see what it takes to be an essay teacher or a para in that classroom. So that as she or he is thinking about who do I hire or help recruit for this position, I know the skills and the competencies they need to have. So that's really key. Then we move into payroll and assignment. In the past, payroll was in finance, and our assignment people were over here. And so what our customers were getting is, oh no, that's payroll. Oh no, that's HR. And they're like this. Well, they're in the same space now. And so you heard Tiffany say we're working very closely with payroll because that continuous level of work, it goes from assignment right into payroll. Professional development with all communities and schools to provide high quality PD. We talked about that. This is an equity issue for me, as many, many things that we do are, providing opportunity and access for development and promotion for every employee group. So think career ladder, think career opportunities. It should not be limited only to APs who want to be principals. What about our teachers who want to take on teacher leadership? What about our bus drivers who want to become trainers? And maybe they want to move into other fields. Had the opportunity to work in a district where I literally saw, and this isn't the pathway that everybody wants to take, but he was a custodian that became a principal. And it's powerful when you begin to see that progression. Talk about taking the ceiling off, where do you want to go? Let's help you get there in service to our kids. So before I get too much into this, I'm going to talk a little bit about the strategic plan. The place where we have to really start is what is our key work. Because when people hear HR, first of all, they don't always think human resources, so we try to make sure we hear that whole piece. But one of the things that we've got to get back to is what HR is and what it isn't. And unfortunately, what it has become for many, and we're going to work to walk away from this, and I'm going to show you something that will help that, I hope, is we are not compliance. Our work is not compliance. Is compliance important in our work? Absolutely. Do we have to be guided by rules and laws and principles and all those things? Absolutely. We have to know this very well. Our work is to impact student learning. And we do that by providing a high-quality workforce, by finding them, by attracting them, by recruiting them, by hiring them, by developing them. And so I keep bringing this back because I don't want us to get into, somebody else talked about compliance. I think it was Jewel. We were talking about the compliance piece and how we can get kind of in that rut. And I think one of the reasons we get into that rut is because we know it. We know those laws. We can quote them and we can go, that's the work, that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to tell you what the law is, and then I can exit stage left. No. The full work is ensuring that we're improving student learning. So this is what we're going to spend some time this year doing. First piece that we're going to do, and I'm going to do this really quickly and show a couple of slides that speak to this. This first part, key work part one, we're going to clearly define what HR work is so that we're all fully aware of what that is and how we can all work together to do that. This circular diagram, and I believe we are going to provide these slides for everybody, right, shows the whole strategic planning process that we're going to go through in HR. So I'm going to just focus on these first two. In the sake of time, I'm only going to focus on these two. But we are going to be looking at our HR metrics and work closely with our teams here to make sure that we have the data that we need to drive our decision making, make sure that we've set our priorities and develop a strategic plan, an HR strategic plan with our goals, priorities, and then going back to, I love Plan, Do, Study, Act, I'm an Aldrich fan, which is where that came from, that continuous improvement cycle. This is Plan, Do, Study, Act right here. So let's talk a little bit about what the plan part is. So what is key work? It's really simple. We overcomplicate HR. A highly effective HR community focuses on the right work, and the right work makes a hiring manager's job in finding and keeping great talent considerably easier. Our job is to make sure that when Iz needs to find someone, we help him do it, help keep that person, and when he's doing that work, we're making it easier. It should not be difficult to find and keep great talent. So that's the center of what we do. Then if you look, and this is coming from the Urban Schools Human Capital Academy. Much like Danelle was saying, free resources are great. I have the pleasure of working very closely in my past life with Susan Marks, who is a consultant with the Urban Schools Human Capital Academy. They are working with Seattle Public Schools, or working with urban schools all over the states. And one of the things that's exciting is when I sat down and talked with her, she actually just moved to Bainbridge Island, which worked out well for me because I was able to say, hey, let's go get coffee. To be in that cohort is like $50,000 or $75,000. She said, but I know that you guys are not at that point. So let's just have coffee. And she gave me a whole bunch of resources for free. And so I'm starting to dive down into what that work is. And so one of the things that is up here, and this, if we think about all hiring managers, that's great. I want to focus just for a minute on teachers. HR's work is around the outside here, and we partner with our principals as our human capital managers. When we provide great teachers, we get great student results. And so what can we do to do that work? So we've really broken it down here through the Urban Schools Human Capital Academy into 8 different puzzle pieces. Teacher preparation and recruitment. And what's in italics underneath that is the outcome if we do this well. We'll have a highly effective pool. Hiring and selection, induction and assignments, staffing and deployment, performance management, linking PD to HR functions, compensation and benefits, which you just saw in there, career management, which is that career ladder I spoke about. Notice what is not a puzzle piece. Labor contracts and agreements. It is not the key work. Does it guide our work? Yes. So it's really important that we make that distinction because we can make it about the contract. So I often hear, I'll talk to principals and they'll have this great creative idea and then they'll say, I can't do it because of the contract. Okay, so let's talk about what are the ways we can address what's in the contract. We do have processes. We can first just start talking to our labor partners about this is the problem we're trying to solve, this is what we thought about doing. What are your thoughts on it? I want to really give credit to our labor partners for the overwhelmingly, unless there's something they see as a negative consequence for their member, which is understandable, they work with us. It's easy to blame and say we can't do it because of that. And so what we're trying to do is say, our labor contracts can guide our work, but let's stay focused on what the work is. And that's moving away from that compliance piece to what the work is. And so that's a really important distinction and a shift from what I think HR has been perceived to be, or maybe has even presented itself to be in past years. So state and federal board policies are also important for us and they guide our work. They certainly should be up there, but they don't drive every piece of it. So we know what the work is. So how do we assess, because this is the plan part, let's think about what we're doing and diagnose. How do we assess our HR work with our partners? We've got 3 major things we're going to be doing this year. And we've done before, but we're going to continue to do. Exit interviews we have done in the past, we will continue to do those and refine the processes with those. You will be seeing a board presentation on our exit survey results from this past year in the next month or 2. We'll make sure that you have those, that data, those data points. We've shared that before, but we want to make sure we share that with you. I do have interesting information about our exit data, and this has been probably the most interesting year to do exit survey data, as you can imagine, because we also send it to those who were ripped. Gallup survey, the Gallup organization actually recommends that you don't send exit survey information to those you terminate, because it's pretty clear what their results are going to be. We did that because we wanted to have practice out in the open. We want to make sure that, okay, let's get it all. But I will share with you that one of the things that really interested me, because I'm not going to talk about why people left, I'm going to focus on why did they come, is they don't come for salary. It's actually the 4th reason out of 5 that they come to work for us. The #1 reason people initially chose to accept a position with KSD is location and commute. So they like to be close to home. The second, very close to that, was KSD culture. 3rd is professional development opportunity. 4th is salary and benefits. And 5th is an advancement opportunity. It doesn't mean that salary is not important. Please don't hear me say that. It is just not the #1 reason that people come to an organization. And I hear this particularly from our millennials. Millennials are very much focused as a generation, and I know this is a broad statement, of being part of an organization that aligns with their core beliefs. They feel like they're going to make a difference. And so that tells me a lot about what we should be thinking about when we think about hiring and selection and induction and assignment. It can guide our work. Now, our stay interviews are going to be starting this fall. There's a reason we haven't started them yet. We're in bargaining. If we begin to talk with people about why are you staying, and it gets into compensation, and it gets into workforce things, we have to be very cautious of that. So we're going to wait till our bargaining is complete, and we're going to be sharing with you our process for conducting the stay interviews. And for those of you who don't know what stay interviews are, they're the opportunity to talk to our current workforce about what, I think we can even put it in the context, and this has been a challenging year. Why did you decide to stay? What were the things about this organization that said, I want to stay here? We also have, and we'll be working with Jewel, we've been talking about climate, a staff climate survey, and we'll be looking at that as another piece of this work. And then this one I'm really excited about as well, and that's our 30, 60, 90-day plans by our HR leaders. And what that's going to mean is, in 30, 60, and 90-day increments, they have developed plans on the people that they're going to connect with to ask them, what's working for you in HR? What's not working for you in HR? What can we do to improve our service? And then they're going to come back in December, because it's going to take that long for us to do this whole thing, those full pieces, and they're going to share with us. This is all going to help us do key work part 2. Then we move into, okay, let's identify our goals, what data do we need, that type of thing. Answer the question. Absolutely, and I think that was my last slide, so it's perfectly timed.
So I wanted to check in on the exit interview, and historically, it's come as a link to the people leaving, and if they fill it out, if they want to fill it out, they fill it out. So how is the process changing, or is it changing? And also, who else is looking into that information, and given certain comments that people made, how deeply are we digging in to see, for example, culture? In a particular school, is there a pattern? Are we looking at patterns when we're looking at exit interviews and specifics?
So let me tell you some of the questions we asked, and then I'll defer to my illustrious colleague on how we could possibly look at that. So the first question we asked is, in what school or district location did you recently work? That does allow us to dive into a particular location. Many individuals don't want to answer that question and choose not to answer that question. We do ask it. We also ask them, what was your recent position type? And we do that by association. We did have someone, I believe they wrote you as well, and said, you should not be asking that question. It tells us it gives away too much information. We did that because we needed to be able to see the work experience of maybe a principal or an assistant principal is different than a paraeducator. And we wanted to make sure that if they said salary was an issue, we weren't lumping everyone together. So they had the opportunity not to answer that question. And then you asked about, we asked would you like HR to share your responses with your supervisor? So if they wrote their school, like Springbrook, and it's anonymous, we don't know who from Springbrook, and more than one person leaves in a school year, would you like us to do that? We can, from there, share those responses. We're still thinking about the best way to do that, but Joel, maybe if you want to talk about how the data.
So this is interesting. Here we go back to the data problem. And we had a really robust conversation about this at our strategic plan steering committee work one evening around goal 2 and this idea of not just exit surveys for staff, but just climate surveys in general. And they asked the same kinds of questions about like how are we digging into this, because their task was identifying metrics. We got into having to ultimately build a culture in the district of trust in order for us to be able to do this work to answer these questions. So moving forward, one of the things I said to my colleagues is there will be no surveys without demographics. Now, no, we have to, because without demographics, you can't get to the actionable piece of data. So two things are important in surveys. You're asking because you want to know something, but you're also asking because you want to be able to do something about what you find out. Without demographics, I cannot do that because I'm left with a general bucket and I don't know who to engage with. Now, when I say who to engage with, I don't mean I need to know that Debbie, I need to talk to you about this thing. However, I may need to know that I need to talk to the board about these issues. And so there's where I talk about demographics. Now, we do have to be careful. We have to come up with some consistent rules about how we report and how we discuss those demographics, because you could get to a point where, and I'll use an example from my previous work, they asked how long you've been with the organization, not school district, this is when I was outside of the school district, when I worked for the IRS. They asked how long you worked for the IRS. They asked what division you worked in. And they asked your ethnicity and your gender. Generic demographic questions, absolutely appropriate. However, in my division, for the number of years that I worked, for my gender and my ethnicity, I was the only one. So I might as well have said that Jewel Harmon says this about what you're doing. Now, here's where we have to build culture around this. This is part of goal 3, building the data culture and helping people understand that there's a difference between anonymity and confidentiality. And so as employees, I think we have to remember that we have no rights to anonymity and we have limited rights to confidentiality. There are laws and rules that protect student data under FERPA. There are very limited rules around what protects employees in a government organization. That is a shift in culture that we have to get to. That does not mean that we're going to thrust it on people and force them to do these things. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we have to build that culture capacity and awareness that they understand. And we're starting to do that through lots of things. We know that through our public records request process. But our employees have very little right to protect their employee data. Under that, there are no protections. So we have confidentiality rights and responsibilities, but not anonymous rights and responsibilities. And so we have to do that. We also have limits about how we report things. We don't report things for groups less than 10. That was not disclosed on the survey that I took that they were asking. But those become operational rules for the district. So we're not discussing and reporting things for less than 10. So if it shows up that you're the only one, those things don't get reported. Because it is essentially saying back out to that group of people that you felt this way about this. And we have to build that culture. And so we have to get to a place where demographics are part of what we do and people understand the why we're asking it. We're not asking it so we can come back to you individually. We're asking so that we can actually make changes in the thing that you've responded to and care about. Without knowing who, or at least what group of who, we don't know how to attack the what, or where to direct the what. And expanding that to all staff. So we've had a staff climate survey. That was essentially school-based instruction staff survey. Not district-wide, not even all school-based employees. So we're going to start getting there and getting to those pieces. So we're going to build a culture. It's going to be hard because we've got to overcome some of those things, but it's part of it.
So one of the things I just want to draw that clear connection, we've been trying to do this all day, and I hope it's been evident, are the interconnections in our work. And that's really what KSD 2.0 is about. It is how we are working. It is the interconnectedness of our work and how we approach that. Whereas before, I think maybe HR, maybe another division at that time, was like, I need this problem, I gotta solve this, and I gotta get IT to do this for me, and I gotta get them to do this for me, instead of, hey, let's sit down and partner this one together, because a lot of what Jewel is sharing, I don't have that knowledge. That's a data perspective that is much deeper than mine. And to not access that resource would be actually the antithesis of what I said was the whole purpose of why I got into this work, was to give her that opportunity to help me grow and develop in this area, and for her to continue to show her skills. So,
And for you to be able to have actionable data to do your job.
wouldn't that be nice, right? And so we do, when we do the exit survey, Maya, you're right, we do send it via a link. We also provide people an opportunity to come in and meet with us as an option, should they want to provide more information. We also provide an area to give comment. That is all anonymous. We've had several individuals who've asked to come in and speak with us, and we take detailed notes on those. So we have those processes as well. Would like to continue to consider this as a proper practice that we can continue to refine and to say, are we getting everything we need in order to do our work? So, any other questions? I know I'm looking at my time. I hit it just right on. Anything else?
Well, just one quick thing. So on one of the things with the exit surveys for those who take it, do we ask whether they feel like it was an effective way to give information back to us about why they were leaving. Just curious.
We haven't asked that question. I think that's a really, that's one we could add.
Because, that might give us some information as well.
Maybe a place for comment, what else would you like to been asked?
We do ask that. That's where they put a lot of their extra comments. And sometimes they may add to that, but we've never specifically asked, did this particular way of gathering this data from you, was it effective for you?
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, different organizations do things different ways, right? I mean, we have, where I work as part of the exit, it's, you meet with HR because you're turning in, keys or anything like that, and that's part of you have a survey you fill out as well, but that's part of the process that you're actually going through as well. So there's that, really letting people know that it's important to us to know why you're leaving, because we want to improve to, keep people, so.
And I think equipping our supervisors to do exit surveys themselves. So providing the opportunity, I mean, that's really powerful. I had 2 individuals who left HR and we did an exit interview. I said, what worked for you here? What didn't? What can we do?
And it needs to come back to HR so that you have that summative data.
Sure.
From all of our districts.
I think it really goes back to the trust, because the reality is that people are, in particular if they've had bad experiences, people of color, those types of things, if they're leaving because of what they, or some type of, well, it could be that, so these are the people that prospective employees are going to call for a reference. And so there's that piece as well. So they're not willing to say, I felt racially discriminated against in this, because that can be an issue. So I think there needs to be multiple opportunities to speak to different people that you might be comfortable with, because your problem could be with HR and it could be with your supervisor, and you went through the whole process. So I think that we really need to look at it, because we're not getting honest information a lot of the time. And like you, I'm the single black female in my administration bill. So if I say where I work, they know exactly, and they know exactly who it is. So I think unfortunately, that's the case for a lot of times. It's a very limited group of people of color that are in these particular spaces. So I think we really have to be careful if that is an issue, or it could be an LGBT, whatever it looks like, right? We have to be an issue. We have to be aware that people are not necessarily going to be honest because of the potential future ramifications of them trying to get employment other places based on what has happened at the previous employer. And I know there's limited things you can say, but the reality is we know that there's nuances to that. So I think just being aware of the barriers that exist.
And that makes me think of, Ross, what you were saying earlier, a couple of our questions about barriers, is SWOT analysis, right? And to really kind of go, what are the options, what are the threats?
Right.
We have a clear vision of what we want this tool to do, what would keep us from being able to get that information. And so have we addressed what some of those threats might be?
One of the nerd steps that's often missed in survey development is a technical term. So when I take a brief nerd bird walk, is actually testing out the survey. So people develop survey questions and they never take the time to pilot because they're so busy trying to get the work done. And it's in that pilot opportunity with people who didn't work on the survey development that you'll hit some of those things about, well, when I went to go do this, I realized that I'm the only one who would do this part. Or you go through and you realize, wow, we completely left out this group.
Yeah.
Or I get to this place and my issue never gets addressed anywhere in here. Or, so I think that's something we've got to build into as we start to do this work, is taking the time to, and that's free, like as we think about climate survey development, all of those pieces, doing that pilot piece to actually see if you're going to get the results that you intend, because otherwise you don't know it until you've gotten it back and you're like, oh, well wait, I missed that opportunity, because we're asking them not to put their name, so you can't go back to the person and say, I missed this.
One of the things I want to just mention really quickly is we talk about the how and interconnectedness. I don't want to assume that you all know this about us. Not only in the cabinet are we putting those things up constantly and remarking and saying, have you thought about this? And we're open to that feedback from one another. We each have one-on-ones with one another. So we're walking through and going, so this is something I'm working on. What do you think about this? That's powerful. That's not existed in executive cabinet before now. That just in the last year has been shifting culture. And that benefits all of KSD when that level of communication is happening. So I didn't know if you knew that was happening, so I wanted to make sure that I highlighted that. So.
obviously, this is the first step in continued conversations. KSD 2.0 is many things. We've talked about this. It is not just fewer people doing more work. It is and should be fewer people working more effectively together. And I trust you were able to see some of the two lines that we refer to as coherent, where there's a system as opposed to silos of people trying to get the work done well. We're going to recess to executive session. I do have, so it's not doing very well with that costume. But we says we'll have lunch here at 54, and we'll check that. Yes, that's an important piece, basic needs, right? As well for so we'll meet in conference room, and absolutely, after we do that, it's 11:45, so once we adjourn.
So just to make sure that Austin and Ken both know that we're not going to be coming back in here for a meeting after that, we're going to adjourn after.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was just gonna ask, just to make sure.
All right, yes, so we are adjourning, and we are postponing our agenda items after, what was it, 11:30, to a possible future date. Hopefully soon.
Yeah.
Two of you.
Yeah.